Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. Tonight, I'm here to present BSL Blethers, and my name is Avril Hepner, and I'm from BDA Scotland. Tonight's topic of debate or discussion is going to be around the differences between the BSL Scotland Act 2015 that we've had the fortunate benefit to enjoy for the last 7 years, but also the Westminster, the UK government's bill. They have a BS bill at the moment going through Parliament, and there's been discussion about that. You can see there's the topic of the debate tonight on our screen. So we want to sort of have a debate to see, are there any differences? Will it impact? And so there's a bit of confusion about the fact that we have now another bill going through Parliament. So we thought it was important that we should invite two speakers tonight who can actually explain about the Scotland process and also the bill that's going through Westminster as well. So we're hoping that our Scottish viewers tonight will actually learn something and understand what the differences are. If for any reason you want clarification or you want to ask something, please, as always, put it in the chat. I'll try my best, if time allows, to ask your question. Now, I know most of you at home will know that this Friday marks the third reading of the bill in Westminster. And I think it was just a perfect opportunity tonight, as Friday's only a few days away. And at the same time, as I'm absolutely sure every single one of you know, it's Sign Language Week. And the BDA have always celebrated Sign Language Week. And this is our week where we really share so much information about our community with other communities. So I am delighted to welcome David Buxton.
Hello,
Hi, David.
Avril. Thank you.
David, could you just quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly, I'm David Buxton. I'm the chair of the British Deaf Association. I'm also the chair of the BSL Bill Deaf Organisation Group. It's a core group involving 9 of the major organisations, the BDA, the RNID, RAD, Sign Health, NDCS, the Black Deaf UK, ABSLT Signature. I think I've mentioned everybody's that 9.
Oh, you forgot
Thank you.
NRCPD.
NRCPD, yes, that makes it 9.
Oh, David, first of all, thank you so much for giving up your time tonight. I know you're extremely busy, and Friday is another deadline, but our audience have so many questions for you. But we just thought we'd grab you now before you disappear in 3 days' time. So I've got some questions of my own, but before I ask you those questions, I'd like to introduce our second guest. This is Erin. Hi there, Avro. Oh, I'm so delighted, Erin, you could join us tonight. Erin, can you tell me a bit about yourself? Well, my name's Erin Mccluskey, and I'm part of the Youth Advisory Group within the Deaf Roots and Pride team. And what we do is we look at, or in the past, we looked at the BSL bill becoming the Act, and also look at plans. So we represent young people all over Scotland. Oh, I'm sure David remembers all about the BSL Scotland Act. David, he supported us when we were all going to Parliament and trying to prepare and make sure that we had everyone inside. And it's so interesting now that we're now in a different situation because our bill has been passed and now you're going through the process. So I've got a few questions for you and David, and I'll ask maybe a couple at a time. And if you can give
Fire
an
away.
answers, that will be great. And for everyone else at home, put some questions in the chat. So I think the first question really to ask you, David, is, and also you're obviously aware that Erin and myself were involved in the BSL Scotland Act. But could I ask you, your bill What actually is included in your bill? What's your plans?
Okay, it's not my bill, is the first point. Really, the MP who proposed it, and I'll talk later about her, but I want to go back to the question that you asked there about the difference between the Westminster proposed bill and the Scottish Act of 2015. So the Scottish Act 2015 focuses particularly on public services and obliges them to create plans at national, regional and local level. So that's the real thrust of the BSL Scotland Act. Now, what Scotland doesn't have, and what Westminster will have that will benefit Scotland, is our Act has a legal recognition of British Sign Language. And that will empower the Scotland Act. So if our bill comes to, is passed and comes into law, then all local authorities, public service providers will have to recognise BSL legally as a language. So you will have the same linguistic rights as Gaelic speakers or speakers of any other language.
Right, okay, David. Okay, so just so as I'm clear, yeah, our Act deals with having a national and a local plan, and we do look at public services and statutory bodies, but part of our Act is to promote sign language as well. And I suppose what you're saying is it's not really legal in that sense.
No, because let me take you back. When parliaments like the Welsh Parliament and the Scottish Parliament were devolved, there were limited powers associated with that devolution. So there are certain things that are devolved, but things like health, police, education, the taxes can be decided in the devolved parliaments. They can't in Northern Ireland. They have limited powers. Scotland has more powers than Wales and Northern Ireland. But nonetheless, those powers are limited compared to Westminster. So issues like human rights legislation can only be decided in Westminster. So BSL can't be recognised through the BSL Scotland Act, but it could be through the BSL Bill in Westminster. Northern Ireland has to pass things through its own parliament because of its historical difference between the legal system in Northern Ireland, and that's based on religious inheritance and so on. But if the bill becomes an act, it will only cover England, Scotland and Wales. That's worth bearing in mind, not Northern Ireland. It will only focus on those three countries, those three principalities, not Northern Ireland.
Okay, so what you're really saying is in order for BSL to have a real legal definition, it has to be through the UK.
Yes. However, Scotland could approach Westminster and ask for special permission under equal opportunities or human rights. You can ask for special permission, but it's not an easy process. So things like civil defence, armed forces, those kinds of things can only be decided at Westminster. The rule of power is so it's different to the devolved governments.
Okay, that's clear. So I understand that we have different powers, but if we want the full legal status, it has to be
human
through
rights
UK.
or equal opportunities. That's my point. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm sorry, I was just about to say your bill. I don't mean your bill. I'm the
Right.
bill that's going through. Could I ask what's actually in the bill? I think, is there 3 things or 4 things that you're covering?
Yes. Can I just wind back a little to the original when Rosie, the MP, had her name selected from the hat? It was a draw of 20 MPs out of, sort of 400, 450. So it's a bit of a lottery who gets pulled out of the hat. It's like bingo, something like that. So Rosie was one of the 20 whose bill was selected, and she wanted to propose the BSL Bill. So she was chosen to propose that. And she began discussions with us, a consortium of organisations, to ask what should be in this bill. So the first thing is legal recognition of British Sign Language. The second was a BSL Council. And the third was public services, so a kind of mirror of the Scotland Act, really to encourage public services to step up. So once these things have been passed through the first reading, they can't be changed, but you can add explanatory notes, okay? So the first thing, the BSL recognition, is there. The BSL Council, the second demand, is not there, and the demand for public services has been changed to the second point. So the BSL committee has been tweaked a little, and there have been some changes to that. So in the third reading, that should match those new changes. So in the third reading will go, so I'm talking about the new one here. The first demand will be recognition, legal recognition of British Sign Language. The second will be to produce guidance, okay, which will be passed through local services and so on. And the third will be that the Secretary of State must report to Parliament every 3 years. So that will be the third condition of the bill. And those three together will make the BSL Bill.
Right, can I just check? So the first thing is the legal recognition in the statutory books of BSL as a language.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is the creation of guidelines, guidance. It's similar, maybe like what we did, like our local plans. What do you mean by guidance?
Slightly different. So the government will publish guidance. Let me say, for example, for health services, for hospitals, GPs, dentists, and so on, any health provider. And the Department of Health, DOH, will have guidance to which those bodies must adhere.
Okay.
So that will be kind of filtered down through the system, that this guidance can't be ignored.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to our local plans.
No,
Oh, they're different.
It's different. Because when you've got a plan, a plan isn't a sort of declaration. So Scottish councils, for example, can decide to follow elements of the plan. They can think about the plan. It doesn't have to happen. It's up to the councils themselves to decide what they feel they can take on, what matches their budgets, and so on. But with the guidance, this will have to be followed. So NHS England, for example, has a guidance on the accessibility standards, the AHI. I don't know if the NHS in Scotland has something similar. I don't think it does. So with the guidance, it won't be voluntary.
So what happens is the difference in England is that in Scotland there's as you say, there's a promotion, you're encouraging people to do it, but I suppose the main difference in England would it be mandatory or it'll be recognised that they really have to do that.
It must lead to action, yes.
Could I ask you, David, could you explain what the Secretary of State means?
So the Secretary of State is the head of one of the government departments. So the Secretary of State for Health, for example, if this bill becomes act, one Secretary of State will be responsible for reporting every 3 years. Now, we don't know exactly who that person will be. It will be somebody at Secretary of State level from within the government.
Do you remember when we had There was different people who presented our bill, but I'm thinking, so what's going to happen is the government will appoint a secretary of state, sorry, maybe it could be for health or education.
It will be definitely under the DWP or the Cabinet Office, because there is a disability unit within the Cabinet Office of Women Equality and so on. So that's likely to come under the DWP. So it will be either of those, Cabinet or DWP. But the bill itself won't state that. It will be open. At the moment, that duty would fall under the Secretary of State, who is responsible for the DWP.
Oh, thanks, David. You've made it really clear about the three things, but there's something about the explanatory notes. Can you explain what that means? What is that? Is that maybe like amendments or is it caveats? What is that? What are they?
Okay, so when the bill is passed, these explanatory notes kind of expand on the elements that are included in the bill. They can't themselves be included in the bill. So, for example, in Scotland, you had the NAG. The NAG itself is not included in the Act. It's slightly separate. So the explanatory notes perform the same function here in England and across the UK. So the mention of a Bsl Advisory Group is in the explanatory notes. It's no longer in the bill, but it is in the explanatory notes. And that advisory group would advise the ministers and help them prepare guidance for, say, the health department, for example. They would be responsible for reading through that, tweaking anything, agreeing solutions with the ministers, and before that guidance goes out. So I suppose the similarity in Scotland would be you've got a national plan which passed through the NAG, is that right? And so the NAG gave feedback, the National Advisory Group gave feedback on that. So a similar sort of system, slightly different, but similar.
Oh, that's clear now, David. You'd mentioned about and something in the first reading about the British Council. What's the British Council?
Okay, the first reading, the aim of that was to establish a BSL Council.
BSL Council.
Yeah. And that would have the equivalent of, say, the EHRC or the Human Rights Commission, or it would be a formal body. It would be government funded. It would be very, very formal. So we wanted a really formal establishment of that, a group that would supervise, guide the government, give advice. And the government didn't want that.
Why?
Because of the cost. Because the EHRC has to be funded, and I think they get about £20 million a year just to run the EHRC, the administrative costs, the communication costs, and so on. So we were looking at a similar budget. I'm not saying that we would take 20 million, but that's just an example. And so we've changed that to an advisory group. Now, I remember in Scotland, before your bill was passed, you also wanted this formal body, and the government changed it to an advisory group. And which later became the NAG.
That's right.
And so it seems quite normal in politics for that to happen. If you include something in the bill that the government doesn't want, they won't support the bill. So it's always a process of negotiation. And you want the government to look at the bill positively. You don't want to provide any stumbling blocks. And you want to give ministers the power to influence, to report something back to Parliament, so you can make additions later in that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a really good explanation. We did have advisory groups as well. Now, I think Erin has a question for you. So, Erin, over to you. Thanks, Avro. Hello, David. You know that Scotland has its BSL Act in 2015, and it took a long time for us to get there. And it really does affect young people, a language being recognised or not. And I'm wondering that is education or anything in your bill that could have an impact or affect deaf young people?
Okay, let's talk about Scotland first. Now, I remember Avril, as Avril said, I was in the background. Obviously, I'm English, so I certainly wasn't leading, but I did provide as much support as I could. Avril was the swan swimming graciously at the front of that campaign. And it was fantastic, worked really well. And that was brilliant. The whole campaign was flawless. And I remember that we put education on the agenda and that was taken
Right.
off. But cleverly, education is still there. It's part of the plans. Now, the same thing will happen for us here at the UK. Now, the Department of Education will have to create its own guidance, and that will have to be followed by schools, by education providers. And I'd be interested to see what the guidance will be about BSL, because we face the same challenges that you do in Scotland. You know,
Yes.
education is a challenge, right?
Oh, yes, same
Erin,
challenge.
you would agree that education is a challenge still in Scotland?
Erin, could I ask you, do you feel you said young people have benefited from the Act in Scotland. Do you want to explain a wee bit about it? Well, I'm not saying for a start that Scotland's perfect. We're not perfect. We've got a lots of things to do, but what we have is possibilities, and that's what I see. I see the hope.
And that's right. All of us in the deaf community, I think, you know, everyone I've met, the biggest topic is always education, because, you know, we can trace that back, can't we? We all know our own experiences as children in the educational system, of being language deprived, struggling to read and write English, trying to, you know, being taught orally, struggling through that system, and receiving a poor education as a result. So education is always the first priority for deaf people. And I see that improving in the future. I don't think we're leaving education behind. I think it's still a problem at the moment, but I think it's very important that the governments of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, everybody is keen to work together. And I think we do have to collaborate. We do have to try and work together to find a solution. I don't think we can be competitive about this. I think, you know, I've been in politics for 35 years, and I realize the kind of adversarial approach is not the way to achieve things. Cooperation gives better results. So if we're adversarial, if we challenge, if we compete, we come up against brick walls. We have to work together. We have to collaborate, because that's the way we build the future, and that's the way we will achieve our goals in the end.
Yeah, David, I remember patience from it all. Need to have a lot of patience. Erin, have you got any other questions relating to young people you want to ask David? You'd mentioned about the BSL Council, and obviously we had our NAG, the National Advisory Group. So when the bill was going through, we had our NAG, but we also had young people on this group as well. Will you have the same?
Sure. I can't really answer, really, only the minister could answer that. But at the moment, the BSL Advisory Group is clear that we must make sure there is diversity of age, ethnicity, all kinds of representation. And the minister has agreed that that's important. So it's not just going to be deaf organisations piling and representing themselves. That's not what we want. We need to be crafty about this. We need to be clever about it. We need to work well to ensure that we get that kind of representation. So you're right. Eventually, we do need to have young people involved in that. At the moment, I don't know if the minister would understand the need for a specific youth advisory group, but I'm certain that there will be young people involved in that advisory group as part of that diversity. because we want young people talking about sports, we want young people talking about VRS and what's the other one? VRS and VLS, yes. And that kind of provision around communication. So it's very important to get young people involved in that. The same with health and hospitals, and we need elderly people for their perspective on health. So we need to have that diversity within the advisory group.
Thank you, David. Just linked with Erin's question, you were talking about young people. I mean, I know you can't answer, but from your expectations, what would you actually I mean, I know the advisory group's not set up and it's maybe too early. I know people are talking just now and wondering who might go in, but I think, as you're saying, the focus is getting through Parliament, get the bill passed, and then once that happens, then there will be representatives on the advisory group. And would you think Scotland would have representative theirs as well?
I've made clear to the minister the importance of that, because the bill does cover England, Wales, and Scotland. So I think it would be absolutely vital to have those people from those countries represented within the advisory group. At the moment, the minister is making it very clear that the bill has to be in collaboration with the Scottish government, with the Welsh Parliament. I think the bill won't work otherwise. So in the guidance notes, which will be updated this week, it will include information on how to work with the devolved parliaments. I haven't yet seen that clause, but I mean, I think
it was about
your process.
the NAG was took about a year.
The NAG, yeah. I mean, I don't know how long it will take. I don't know if if our bill gets passed into an act, how long it will take to establish that body. But for example, the Department of Education will only be giving its guidance to health bodies in England and possibly Wales, but not Scotland, because Scotland has its own. But I don't know the detail of how that will affect Scotland's need to devolve its own plans through its health providers.
Okay.
So what we need to do is to kind of integrate some of these things, because what works well in Scotland might work well in Scotland. What works well in Wales might work well in Wales. It might not work well for England. So it's really about making sure that each government knows how best to handle the situation in their country and how we all work together. It's kind of teamwork, if that makes sense.
Am I fair to say, David, it's like doing a jigsaw, because you've got 3 countries with 3 different bits of information. You have to make sure they're all part of the one thing. So you'd said that, I mean, I would assume, quite honestly, that Scotland should have a voice at the table. But what about young Scottish people? I'm thinking 1 or 2. Erin's, nope, I do not think. I think we need more than that. I think you need 3 to 5 young people, because again, all young people, particularly in Scotland, and I'm sure it's the same in England as well, they've got various different experiences. Some people have a very negative experience of education, others don't. So I would be saying, if Scotland were involved, I would want to make sure that our voice could be heard at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that. I mean, the challenge is, how many people were in your NAG altogether? 11.
11, I think.
There are going to be limited numbers, right? So if you're talking about 5 young deaf people from Scotland, then how many old people? What about old people from Scotland, old people from Wales, old people from England? And before you know it, you've got an enormous group. So that's always the challenge, isn't it? It's always the challenge. When we think about ethnicity, we want someone from each background. We want someone from each region. So I think we need kind of to make sure that we choose the best people to come in and represent the best way. And really, it's about fine-tuning that. It's a big machine, really, to be honest, representing the whole of the UK. I'm not sure what the Scottish government would do about any guidance that was created in England. We need to find out more about that, and that will be very interesting. We live in interesting times, as they say.
Absolutely. But I mean, you can appreciate, David, that deaf people have been waiting a long time for this, and they've been waiting, and they want the answers now.
Sure.
But like us in Scotland, it was a step-by-step approach, and when we had the NAG set up, we really did have to go through a very robust system to make sure that we could find the people that we thought could best represent us. I think it is it's useful to have, ideas about who's going to be there and what their hopes and dreams are.
You're right, and I would add that it's really important, that when you've got a BSL advisory group, it isn't just about people putting their hands up and saying, I want to be in it. I mean, the NAG advertised, didn't they? And there was a process of
Right.
application and so on, and there were interviews and people
Yeah,
were
and it
recruited
was
on
done,
that basis.
following equal rights.
It's going to be something like that for the BSL Bill Act. Now, now a BSL committee would have to be very clear that, they've said that they would be sending out invitations in the summer. So I don't know what the involvement or what the representation would be of people from Wales, from Scotland, but I'm sure there will be some invitations coming your way. I mean, the 9 organisations have made it very clear to the minister that we urge diversity within that group, kind of geographically and sociologically. Exactly how that mechanism will function, I'm not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, David, just to let you know that it wasn't easy establishing an act. We were only looking for 11 people at the whole of Scotland. That we thought it would be easy, but it was difficult. A
Yeah.
bit challenging. But as Erin said, we had 10 goals, and we managed to agree, get a consensus of that. And I think that's what we have to sort of, within the deaf community, we have to remember, we have to have patience, we have to, it's step by step.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't mind being open that I did apply for the commissioner of HRC. Oh, I can't remember when that was. I applied for that, and went through all the paperwork and everything, and I sent that in, and I wasn't shortlisted. Now that surprised me. I was like, okay, I'm sure there are crowds of people applying to be on the Human Rights Commission, and then I wrote a letter asking for feedback. And they said, oh, there are lots of applications. And I said, well, how many applications from deaf people? And they said, well, there were 2 deaf people who applied and were on the short list. And when I found out who those 2 people were, my skills and experience were far in excess of theirs, and yet they were chosen for all kinds of other reasons. So just because you have skills and experience doesn't mean that you're going to be the person who's chosen. There are always reasons about those selection processes and finding balance within the. Actually, as it turned out, neither of those 2 deaf people got through, and I feel like perhaps I could have done, but they do need to find balance across the body of the body that they're recruiting for. So I think that's going to be the same when we put together the BSL advisory committee. It'll be about diversity. Some people will be annoyed that they're not chosen, others will be delighted. Skills and experience might not necessarily be the thing that get you around that table. Do you know what I mean? I that's my view anyway. It'll be about representation and balance.
And I think really what's important is you're there to represent the deaf community as a whole. You're not there for personal gain. And I think that's key to it. We've had a number of questions coming in, David, while we've been online. Could I just check? Is it there deafblind people included in this?
Okay. the explanatory notes didn't have any mention of deafblind people, but in consultation with the 9 organisations, we recognise that as a gap. And Deafblind UK and one deafblind individual in particular have assisted us. You know, we haven't just kind of thought it up ourselves. They've put together some wording that's gone forward to the minister, come back with a possible change. And so that will be included in the explanatory notes, which should be published this week, ready for Friday. It should be published soon.
Delighted to hear that. Erin's got a question for you, but if you can put that on hold, Erin. We've got a couple of questions coming in from the deaf community. You'll see the question popping up on your screen, and it's from Gary West. And Gary's saying, just curious, after the third reading's passed, does it not have to go through the House of Lords again for another 3 readings before royal assent? Or am I wrong? Is that right?
No, that's right. That's right. So the third reading this Friday is a reading in the House of Commons, and that's the final reading in the House of Commons. Historically, the House of Commons has been more powerful than the Lords, but the problem is the Lords is a higher house. It's an old English tradition. So although it's contentious, that the Lords does have some power. But the BSL bill, if it's passed on Friday, will go to the Lords on the 21st of March.
Okay.
Not for its first reading, but for an introduction. The second reading will be on the 25th of March, next Friday, the following Friday. And if that is passed at the second reading, then there'll be the Easter recess. So the Lords will be in recess for 3 weeks. So when the Lords are back after the Easter recess, there will be a committee in the law. It will go to committee in the Lords, and then it will go to the third reading. And then if that is passed, if it's passed in both houses will agree any final amendments, and then it will be subject to vote. If the vote is passed, then it is not yet enacted. It's kind of an act, but it has to go, as you say, for royal consent. And the Queen signs that document, and it is then legally an act.
Oh, can you imagine, David? You know, you could get that signed
I
just before the
I
Queen's Jubilee.
love the Queen's signature on that. Because, I mean, if she thinks back to what would that be, her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who could fingerspell and who could sign, because her great-grandmother had been deaf. So, and also her mother-in-law was deaf. The Princess of Greece, yeah.
That's right, don't forget that.
Law could fingerspell. She could speak as well, but she signed and she could fingerspell. So there is that kind of sensibility there, and I hope that they're standing on the Queen's shoulder when she writes it. I really hope those presences are there.
Remember, the Queen signed the BSL Scotland Act after she gave royal assent.
Of course, we want photos, photographic evidence.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you for answering Gary's question. I'll have a look and we'll see if there's another one. There's another one coming in from Helen. And Helen's asking, the guidance that you mentioned, or guidelines, are they like rules, or is it just, can you do it if you want? So really, if the bill is passed and it is enacted in law, you mentioned that these guidance notes or guidelines will be sort of cascading through different departments. Can you clarify?
Well, I have reasonable English, but this is my understanding, so please don't take this as gospel. So it's guidance, I think. Guidance is more formal, whereas guidelines are a little bit more flexible. You know, you don't have to follow them if you don't want to. They're sort of tips, as it were, guidelines. But when we're talking about guidance, then this is much more formal. And this is similar to the accessible information guidance. So we are talking about guidance attached to this bill, not guidelines. You're the linguist, Avril, so I don't know about the signs here, but I'm making the difference in my signing between guidelines and guidance. So guidelines, I think, a little bit more flexible, but guidance more formal.
Absolutely, I get that. So referring to your actual bill, is it going to be guidance?
Guidance, yes.
Guidance, so
Guidance.
formal guidance.
A formal one, guidance, yes. Much more formal. And if I can think of examples of that, you know, if you're running an organization and you say something, you make a kind of policy statement to the staff about, say, a complaints procedure. That is guidance. It's not guidelines. You can't just decide whether you want to do that or not. There is a policy and complaints procedure that must be followed. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. It's not guidelines that are flexible and, you know, may be followed or may not. We're talking about guidance.
Superb. Thank you so much, David. We have another question coming in. Oh, but I'll hold on to that question just now because it's linked with Friday's debate. Erin, did you not have another few questions for David? I certainly do, Avril. Could I ask you, David, when we thought about, are you going to look at the BSL Scotland Act and all the work that's been done in that, and then create your work around us, build on it, or are you going to just start from scratch, start fresh again?
Right.
What's going to be that relationship?
Yeah. Really, originally, what we proposed for the bill was the legal recognition, BSL Council, as I've said, and then plans, which was a kind of copy of the Scotland Act, not quite as intense, a bit more short and simple, because we want to avoid the bill being filibustered out with people asking questions about, you know, clarification about what this means, and it getting talked out of Parliament. So we've kept it short and simple, short and sweet. So really kind of pretty much an echo of the Scottish way with the Act. But actually that got changed. So we are now looking at this idea of guidance, so that each department will create its own guidance, and whether they may or may not be applied in Scotland. But each government department must create this guidance, and that will be passed down through their department and out to all of the constituent bodies they serve. Now, not in Northern Ireland, I remind you, but this is seen as quite strong, and my hope and my belief and my understanding is that that is right. But education, for example, the Department of Education, our guidance would not be applicable necessarily in Scotland, because education is a devolved matter for the Scottish Parliament. I don't have the details of how that would work in fact, but it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Can I ask, just relation to Erin's question, say for example the bill passes, okay, so it goes through both houses and it has royal assent. Can I ask you quite clearly, how will it affect Scotland's actual act? Will our act disappear and
No,
you'll then take over it?
no, your act will
Okay,
stay.
but will then, okay, if ours then stays there, will then there be additional powers, legal
It should
powers?
be empowered, because you'll get legal recognition of the sign
Okay.
language. So that will empower your act. Whether you have to follow all of the guidance that's created in the UK by the UK government, I'm not sure, but that will be there. And it will be interesting to see what happens, for example, like the access to information standards for NHS England. They've been a source of frustration, a bone of contention. Once that guidance from the Department of Health is in place, then that's no longer an issue. Whether the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament would then call up that guidance, perhaps it might help instigate some of the plans north of the border. It might help your plans to kind of come to fruition. But everything will be new. It will be a new landscape. But certainly it's not designed to take over your bill. Your bill won't disappear. Your act won't disappear. It will be like the icing on the cake, as it were. So England and Wales will still have effectively less than Scotland's, because Scotland will already have their Act and the BSL UK Act. So it'll be a good thing.
Great. I mean, Scotland, from my position, is that Scotland has its parliament and it has its own strengths and powers, but England supersedes that.
No, because the BSL Scotland Act is a BSL Scotland Act. Scotland that's been going for, you've got 10 goals for 7 years, or is it 8 years or something? Yeah, 6 years.
Yeah.
So those 10 goals you've been working towards, and I think that's fantastic. And personally, I absolutely applaud the Scottish Government for the work that they've done from the BDA's perspective, in terms of communication and the development of a relationship with the Scottish Government.
Couldn't agree more.
Fantastic. They've brought in people for their policy work, their BSL development work. They've got SMPs, and they've got of all parties supporting BSL. It's very, very positive from what I can see that's happening in Scotland. We've got deaf people standing for election as members of the Scottish Parliament. They've got funding for community engagement and to fund those people. I think we've seen an enormous improvement in Scotland as a result of the Act. So I take my hat off to you and to the work that the Scottish Government has done, and particularly through COVID, having the interpreters visible on screen with the First Minister, and absolutely wonderful, a fantastic level of service. Well done, Scotland.
Thank you, David, for that. It does mean a lot, and I do agree. So I suppose then, once your bill passes, there really will have to be good communication and negotiation between both Scotland and Westminster parliaments. And, in Scotland, once we went through the process, we ended up having a BSL policy officer, and other deaf people got other positions that could influence change within the government. So do you think your bill will attract, or your act will attract, that position?
What do you mean? Well, we've already got policy. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this, but if the bill becomes an act, then the people who will do the work for the government, that really provides all kinds of opportunities for people to get involved in policy and to really strengthen that guidance being rolled out. So I don't know, 10 years hence, whether we'll have BSL planning people in education and in health, and to make that guidance, to turn that guidance into policy and to make it happen. I mean, I think that there are opportunities there. I think there's a lot of potential for funding. You have VRS.
Yeah, we have. It's Contact Scotland. We have
Contact Scotland. There you go. You're far ahead of us. We don't have anything like that here. So some kind of health contract for counselling, which we have here. I think Scotland is way ahead. And again, hats off to you. Hats off to you.
Well, maybe Scotland then becomes the role model for you guys.
We've already said to the minister, look at what's happening in Scotland. NHS England is already aware of some of that work that's being done. They've already taken out a contract with Sign Health, which is fantastic. I applaud them for that. But the accessible information standards also are kind of really important. And there's a lot of pressure now from BSL, from the BSL lobby, to take action on that. And I can see these issues coming up again and again across the UK. And I hope these are first steps, really. I hope it helps to raise awareness across the board.
David, it was exactly the same for Scotland. It wasn't a straight path. We had to meander our way there. But you'll get there, absolutely. Erin, I think if you got a question. Oh, I've got one last question, Avril. Um, David, you'll remember in 2003, 19 years ago, BSL was recognised as a language that was used in the UK. So it's taken 19 years to get to the third reading of a bill. So where do you see yourself in the 19 years in the future?
Oh goodness, you're right. Well, we in 2009 we danced, we celebrated, we thought we'd done it, but we hadn't got the information exactly clear. I mean, I think I have a letter somewhere. This was the letter that we were given. We were almost patted on the head, as it were, and told, there you go, off you go, you've got what you wanted. But it had no legal recognition. And the government, I think, knew that, and it has taken, as you say, 19 years for us to say, okay, this is enough. We need an act, and we need it now. And this really started last year. This real momentum just became a whirlwind of pressure. And we've got this real opportunity now. So I think 19 years hence, I'm not sure, I don't think we'll be sitting back and resting on our laurels. I think there'll be work for the deaf community to do to monitor the implementation of these bills, these acts, to make sure that services are being met, are being provided. And Erin, sort of back before you were born, I'm
I was
sorry.
a baby, David.
I remember, a private members bill going forward, but it was voluntary for euthanasia, right? And people kind of wanted that to become law, but it was resisted by the government, and it took a lot of pressure, and people began to be fined because they weren't acting
Not wearing,
according to the law.
yeah, they weren't wearing the seatbelt.
Exactly. And so
Yeah,
when that
got it.
legislation came in, there was a lot of work to do to make sure that legislation was implemented. Back when we didn't have to wear seatbelts, the number of deaths
Ah,
declined as a result
yeah,
of the
that
fines,
happened
and
in
people
Scotland too.
gradually taking that behaviour on board. So just passing the act itself wasn't enough. You had to change people's behaviour. So, I've seen problems where the implementation is difficult. I mean, the government didn't provide any funding to implement that seatbelt bill, but as soon as fines came into place, then things changed, right?
Erin, oh, thank you, David. You finished? You go ahead, Erin, if you get another one. Okay, I would just love it, David, if you could give us one example of what you would like to see being in place in 19 years' time.
For me, it's got to be education. It's the most important thing, because deaf children suffer from language deprivation, and they have poor English level skills, and they're forced to speak and listen, and it's exhausting. So 19 years hence, I would like to see a complete revolution in education. I'd like to see sign language being learnt by families much earlier on. I'd like audiologists to be signing. I'd like education to be accessible. I'd like level 4 to be the fundamental basic qualification for anyone working in education. I'd like deaf people to be employed in education, deaf fluent signers to be employed in education, real deaf people, so that the children's teachers and anyone
And
working with
become
deaf
role
children can
models
actually
too.
sign. Yeah, and then we get great education, and then who knows? we won't be helping deaf children who can't understand things. We'll have bilingual children who are fluent in sign language, who are fluent in English, and then we're looking at a much more positive future. So that's what I'd like to see in 19 years. I'm trying to work out how old I will be in 19 years. I know, Erin, you probably think I'm very old already, but I'm trying to work out how old I would be.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry, David.
Avril, I think we're on the same page, aren't we? You're right.
Yeah. Erin, what would you like to see then for young people in 19 years' time? We'll turn the question on yourself. Oh, I think for me, I'm the same as David. I want to see a massive improvement in the education provision for deaf people. And I think we have to agree, without a quality education, you are not living your life to your full potential.
Education, learning and training, those three things, absolutely so.
Yeah, so that's my first thing. I want education to improve for all deaf people. And again, I would love for hearing families to be encouraged to learn sign. And I just don't want any more deaf children having the language deprivation is what they've been getting. And also, I think there has to be a seismic attitude shift from audiologists, where they don't just have the
And it's,
medical model of disability.
and it's important that we convince the government of that, and that we do it now. And so that we get those building blocks in place, so that we are reducing any potential mental health issues for our
Couldn't
deaf
agree
population
more.
in the future.
Yep.
And David is freezing on my screen.
Yep, what we've got is that, and if you think to the future, then what we should have is all the issues that we've got now shouldn't be there, because they'd be identified and then they'd be managed, because we understand the early intervention and early linguistic access will help all deaf children, and they will achieve at the same rate as their peers.
Thank you, Helen.
Well, I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet here. I think we're all agreeing that our passion, our heart, our raison d'etre, our very essence is education. So, time, would you believe it, is running out? But I've got two questions I really want to ask you. It's going to be upon us on Friday. I mean, we're at Tuesday. So, we're what, 3 sleeps away from
Yes,
the big event on Friday, and I wish you the best of luck. I wish everybody has been involved. But this Friday, what are actually the plans? I think people are gathering. Could you give us a kind of brief description?
yeah, just in brief, on Friday we'll be gathering in Trafalgar Square, where Nelson's column is. That's the
Know
iconic
the
thing
very
to look
one.
for. I can't
I
remember
think
which
his
eye it is,
hands
so it's
in.
got a
Is it
patch on,
his
but anyway,
left hand?
Nelson's column. And we're aiming to celebrate Sign Language Week. So we have various themes. We have some speakers coming in. We have a comedian. We have some BSL.
Oh,
We have some BSL poetry. We have some deaf children. We have some deaf young people coming along. A deaf ethnic women's group. Some sports, various things. Various speakers coming in to
sounds
entertain
like a
the crowd.
party.
And we will. It's a big opportunity. And we have a
So
very,
excited.
very big star coming along that people will be very excited about. But also, we're not drawing attention from the BSL bill being read in Parliament. We are going to have an enormous screen, like a big TV screen.
Wow.
It's really massive, honestly, for the crowd to watch live the vote from Parliament. So hopefully we'll see it pass its
What
third
time?
reading.
Do you know?
We'll watch it in real time.
Oh, David, you've frozen there. Oh, thank you. It's came up in the bottom of our screen. Thank you for that. So it's 11:30 till 2:30 in Trafalgar Square.
So it's a real celebration of Sign Language Week, but will also be about the bill. And there are lots of people involved. It's something for everyone, old, young, gay, all of our communities coming together to celebrate Sign Language Week and to watch that reading live, the results of
Oh,
that reading.
fantastic. I've got one question that's come in from the audience, and it's from Lucy Niven, and this is Lucy's question. I'm so looking forward to the rally on Friday at Trafalgar Square. If we bring banners or posters, what would be a good thing to write on them?
Oh, you could put my language should be, recognize my language, maybe. I want a positive education for the future.
Could we show maybe our hands? Maybe.
Recognition is equality, or just BSL. I don't know, you could do something, couldn't you, with the acronym BSL, beautiful S something language. I don't know, something like that. So you've got BSL, beautiful something
You
with
could
S.
maybe cut out hands,
Just
David.
to get creative, yeah. You can have banners that say, perhaps, my life experience ... or the time to change, or no more waiting, 19 years is enough, now.
Like it. Yeah.
Something like that. I don't know, I'm freestyling
Oh,
here, but something like
brilliant.
that.
Would you believe it? We've actually went past our hour. I can't believe it myself. We could have talked more, but I really have to say to Erin, and really to give the last floor to you, Erin, to give out something positive. Well, I really just want to say that let's look forward to the future for Scotland, England, and Wales, deaf communities working together to make everywhere a better place to live and work. Yep. And well, Erin, you're the deaf role model for the future.
Indeed, you are our future. So over to you.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
like a relay. We've run this far with the baton, and then we pass it to you.
Thank you.
Before us, there was the FDP. Before that, there was the National Union of the Deaf. Before that, there were, yes, all kinds of fights since 1880. The baton has been passed on and on and on and on, and you need to be there ready to pick up the baton until our deaf communities are
I'll
equal,
be there.
our language is recognised, and we are included in society, and we have achieved equality. And I'd like to give the last word to Dot Miles. You and me, we fight for equality. That's a famous quote from a Dot Miles poem. Don't ever forget that. Keep that in your heart. Keep that in your mind. And don't let them brainwash us. You and me, we fight for equality. Together we get it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's great to have us all together, particularly on Sign Language Week. And it's lovely to support all our friends in England. And I'm sure we will all work collaboratively together, because really all of our passion is sign language. Can I thank both of you for giving up your time and for
Well,
sharing your thoughts and explanations with us and the deaf community, and just explaining what the difference is and how it will impact? I think you've really helped us to understand. Good luck on Friday. Thank you again to both of you, and it's bye from all of us at BSL Blethers.
bye.